Hello, welcome to the New Stack Makers, a podcast where we talk about at-scale application development, deployment, and management. Thanks for joining us today. This is Swapnil Bhatia for the New Stack, and we are here at the OpenStack Summit Sydney, Australia. Today, we are speaking with Radhesh Balakrishnan, who is a General Manager of OpenStack at Red Hat. Radhesh, we all know you very well, but just for the sake of this interview, can you please quickly tell us a little bit about yourself and your role at Red Hat?
Sure, Radhesh Balakrishnan is the name, and I am the General Manager for OpenStack at Red Hat. That's another way of saying I wake up every day thinking about OpenStack and how do we make sure that we drive massive and broad-based adoption of OpenStack, pervasive adoption of OpenStack across the globe.
Right. While we are talking about the adoption of OpenStack, this question I ask almost every stakeholder of OpenStack community. And if you look at the history of OpenStack, there was integrated release, then there was a big tent, and then last year they, talked about composability, and this year they're talking about open and collaboration. So what do you think about this evolution of OpenStack over the period of time?
I think it's reacting to the trends that are happening around open source in general, as well as the momentum behind OpenStack itself, right? That's the good part about having a community-driven innovation model, right? So we are at a good spot in that OpenStack has proven itself to be the open underlying infrastructure for a number of verticals. If you look back a couple of years ago, we were talking about telco as a new use case, and now every single telco across the globe is using OpenStack by default for their NFV efforts, etc. So being able to react to the demands out there and then chartering your course is an absolute requirement. Now, looking forward, the reality also is that containers are becoming more of the first level conversation that most of the CIOs want to have. So how does the world of containers and OpenStack come together much better is a key area of focus from a Red Hat perspective. So these are all good developments in many ways. If open source is fundamentally changing the world, you got to make sure that OpenStack is also evolving to embrace the surrounding projects, etc., and play nicely with all the other projects. And from our vantage point as Red Hat as a company, our job is always to make sure that we are looking across multiple projects, bringing the best of all of that, and then packaging them and providing to customers. So it's all good thing for the customer.
Yeah, let's just stick to the evolution path. This year, yesterday, the keynote theme was open and collaboration, right? Because nobody uses just OpenStack. There are different components that they use. Now the thing with Red Hat is, Red Hat or SUSE, there are two Linux vendors who have been contributing majorly to major open source projects. So you guys know very well, what it means, to kind of collaborate or bring different parts together. So how do you think is OpenStack Foundation or OpenStack community going to work with these different communities, like Kubernetes communities or whatever else is there? So when you talk about open and collaboration, what do you mean by that?
Yeah, so the devil is in the details when it comes to this, right? So aspirationally, the foundation is setting the course saying, hey, we need to work much more broadly. And from the spirit of it, we have to agree with that notion. Now, for us, what it actually means is that how do we look at customer needs and prioritize feature requirements across multiple projects that are out there and make sure that we are driving that in harmony across multiple upstream projects, right? That's the role that we've been doing. And now if every single upstream community starts looking at working with each other as a part of the mandate, then our job gets easier, is the way we look at it. Does that make sense?
Right. Just one more thing I would like you to explain would be that how involved Red Hat is with the OpenStack Foundation, and looking at that involvement, how will this coordination between different projects going to work in real? As you said, ideally, realistically, how it's going to work? Because there are some projects that are owned by either Linux Foundation or like Kubernetes, that's part of CNCF. So how will the kind of collaboration be there realistically?
That's why I was earlier saying it's devil is in the details. Right. But then I think from a pure technical perspective, CI/CD would be the kind of a starting point in terms of okay, how could we be
Okay.
stitching together the underlying mechanisms we are using to make sure that we are collaborating together. So that's an area that we're looking at. And I think as we dialogue more with other members of the foundation, we will be able to chart the course. It's just the intent announcement today,
Right.
and then the devil is in the details in terms of working through that, and we're excited about the journey ahead.
Right. One thing that is kind of unique about open source is that there is nothing like, okay, we have intent to announce something today. The work, because every community works in open, so the work already, I think, it starts. That you already start talking to the community. There is nothing like Apple, that, oh, we are announcing iPhone X today. You had no information. So the work starts, in the back end already. So are you aware of any kind of engagement which is already happening between the OpenStack Foundation or OpenStack community and other community like CNCF or Kubernetes, where they're already working on the code level?
Well, so already there are multiple projects which traverse these diverse technologies, right? So you look at, Cola, for example, right? Or Courier, for example, which is for bringing in, when you're thinking about containers on top of an OpenStack infrastructure, you want to avoid overlay on top of overlay. So Courier is a project for that. So there are already code-cutting efforts underway to bring together a world of containers, VMs, and physical machines together. Now, the only delta I see is that if what we have seen is more of a bottom-up developer community level collaboration happening, now from a top-down foundation perspective also there might be sponsored activities to further that, right? So think of it as more wind in the back of the efforts to bring these together much more rich manner.
Right. Now let's talk about Red Hat and OpenStack. The Red Hat OpenStack Platform 12 was announced, and one of the features, I don't know how important is that feature, is that you are containerizing a lot of OpenStack services there.
Yeah.
Which also kind of, as you started, the interview, that containers are, kind of becoming the first,
Yeah.
How is container? I mean, you don't talk about the relic stack, but I'm just kind of curious that how containers are going to kind of transform even the traditional, when you look at Red Hat Enterprise Linux, you already have, atomic, host, but it's now affecting the OpenStack. So can you talk about how containers are going to kind of, touch almost everything, and everything will kind of become container?
Yeah, I think you kind of answered the question, which is that
that's a good thing of following an industry closely,
Yeah, that's right. Containers are touching everything, and everything is getting containerized. But specific to OpenStack, I think the way to look at it is, first is two perspectives to bring to effect. First is on the tenant side of OpenStack, when you're running an OpenStack cloud, can you have VMs and containers and physical machines interoperate with each other so that when you have applications that are traversing these, they are managed as one entity and you're not having to have a disparate set of tools to manage that, right? So that's one side of it. The other one is, can you use containerization as a technology itself to address some of the challenges with infrastructure management, which is around upgradability, scale of the infrastructure, or even fine-tuning resource utilization, etc. So if you look at these two views, on the first one, OpenShift on OpenStack has been our focus area, which is if you can run OpenShift on OpenStack and make that experience rich, then you can bring together the world of VMs and containers in a rich manner. On the second part about making infrastructure much more easy to manage, etc., and that's where the OpenStack Platform 12 introduces containerizing of OpenStack services themselves. So when you can have fine-grained control over what you're deploying in your OpenStack environment, and you can upgrade the piece parts because they're isolated enough, and you can scale them independently as well. So that makes for a good journey along in terms of how we want to grow with the infrastructure that you're building. Does that make sense?
Right, it does, perfect. And beyond this containerizing, these services, what else is new in this release, which is more or less like to address the needs of the new markets or new emerging use cases?
Yeah. So one thing I would like to call out is the Open Daylight as a tech preview in OpenStack Platform 12. We've been having it as a tech preview in the last two releases. Now the reason that's important is that we have seen customers embarking on software-defined networking along with rolling out OpenStack as a, it's not an afterthought, but it's being done in conjunction. So if you look at Paddy Power, Betfair, or if you look at some of the large customers like Verizon, et cetera, every one of them have gone on an SDN path when they are talking about OpenStack implementation as well. So there's a lot of interest from the customer side to get to an open SDN implementation as well. So that's we are maturing that technology with the latest release that we put out. So that's one thing I would like to call out. Another area is around composability. So if you look at OpenStack Platform 10, which was 2 releases ago, we introduced the notion of composability of services. So here, this gives the administrators the ability to implement OpenStack, which is absolutely fine-tuned for their requirements. Meaning, you don't have to look at every single project as a monolithic block, but you can have sub-services that are deployed and fine-tuned for your environment, right? Now, when you do that, the risk is to get to a snowflake, right? So what we did with OpenStack Platform 11 is to make sure that even in a composable role scenario, you can upgrade from version to version. So you get the customizability, but at the same time, you're not losing out on the ability to move from version to version. With OpenStack Platform 12, we are furthering that with the introduction of composable networks so that you have choice in terms of what kind of networking option you can choose. If you want top of the rack, etc., you can specify that. So it's all about building more flexibility as you're rolling out OpenStack-based clouds.
So when you talk about composability, from what I understand, it's more like, instead of, the big giant, OpenStack, the whole thing, you have different components that you can use independent of each other, right? Mm-hmm. Is that correct? Or how do you define composability in more defined, definition?
Yeah, so let's say take an example of Neutron, for example. So Neutron itself is made up of several subservices. Right. So if you want to, have specific daemons or specific subservices be deployed in a particular node because of the capacity that you're expecting, then you can fine-tune and then deploy that alone, rather than having to think about, okay, hey, look, I need to deploy Neutron in multiple nodes, right? So you're getting a much more granular level of composability of the infrastructure, right? Hence the composable roles.
Right. But when we look at Red Hat, what's unique about you guys versus other companies or open source companies is you offer the whole stack solution that your customers don't have to look around or hunt around. Mm-hmm. So how does it work? That at one end you are trying to give customers the flexibility. Mm-hmm. At the same time, Red Hat tries to help them as much as they can. You don't have to worry about running the whole thing. You just your customers everything. So how does these two different things? Do you understand my question? Am I making sense or not?
Yeah. Let me phrase it and then tell me if I got it right. Which is, hey, part of our job is to make it simple enough that customers don't have to think too much about deploying it. Right. But something like composable roles, it means that you got to go dig a little deeper to understand the different components, etc. Right. So where does that? So that comes down to when you're looking at OpenStack users, the personas that are deploying OpenStack range broadly from the ones that want simplicity to the ones that want to customize it because they are betting their business on it. They want to get every ounce of benefit out of the investments that they have made. So when you're a power user of OpenStack, clearly you want to be able to optimize your infrastructure. Now, that's all the more important if you're coming from, I'm bringing back workloads from a public cloud onto a private cloud kind of environment, right? Because in a public cloud, you don't get the ability to fine-tune your infrastructure. Whatever the public cloud provider is giving you is what you got. So being able to address this need is important for the sustenance of private cloud and OpenStack as well, right? So that's a good middle ground that we need to be able to strike.
Yeah, because your customers include big car makers, big telecom players. So yeah, they are not, they don't want just turnkey solution. You turn it on, you get the water, and it's done, right?
Yeah, they do want turnkey, but at the same time, they still want ability to control, right? I mean, and it goes back to maybe the very fact that our most loyal customers are also Red Hat Enterprise Linux customers, mm-hmm. and anybody who uses Red Hat Enterprise Linux, mm-hmm. they'd like to straight away get into the command line, console, and then fine-tune their experience, right? Because they know way more than an average administrator who just went to a fancy degree course and tried to manage a let's say a proprietary system, if you will, right? So,
yeah. One last question I would like to ask is that the OpenStack Foundation also released the user survey or user report that it do. What are the new use cases of, like you mentioned, that telecoms are picking up, and these days when we look at OpenStack, it more or less looks like a telecom story nowadays, So have you seen other use cases or unique use cases of OpenStack where people are deploying it, where you did not even expect it? So can you talk about some of the unique use cases that Red Hat is serving?
Yeah, I think one is, containers and OpenStack is one area, right? Not that unexpected, but clearly that's a evolving use case where a number of our large customers are asking for the combination of that, right? So that's an evolving use case. Another one is moving from the core towards edge computing. So edge computing is a big area of focus for a lot of customers. So, there the trick is to be able to offer the services, but at the same time have manageability in a way that it's not cumbersome, right? You don't want to have a heavyweight management when you're moving intelligence from core to the edge, etc. Right? So that's something that we are focused on, and how do we make sure that we achieve the right balance there. Outside of that, I think there is beginnings around using machine learning to be able to fine-tune an OpenStack environment as well. To me, that's personally, as a computer enthusiast, that's an exciting space to be in, right? Because everybody, every single day we are talking about artificial intelligence and machine learning, etc. So bringing some of those constructs back to OpenStack and making sure that the manageability of OpenStack itself gets better with better log aggregation and better ability to predict as well as maintain the infrastructure. Those are all exciting possibilities in front of us.
I would like to talk more about machine learning and edge, giving the restricted. When we talk about machine learning, what kind of a scope do you see is there, and how ready the existing solutions are there?
So
for OpenStack,
for OpenStack is going to be just just the infrastructure component of machine learning
what I'm talking
environment.
About, are you talking about, will the OpenStack be the part of building the machine learning platform, or it will be consuming machine learning, whether it's monitoring or logging or
reacting to I was more referring to the latter.
Yeah,
right?
that's what my question was too. That how machine learning is going to help OpenStack.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So I think we're in. To be fair, we are making baby steps in that direction. First is we just about got to common log aggregation right now, right? Because every single module within OpenStack spits out so much data. Can we bring it all together in one place so that you can find the proverbial needle in the haystack, right? So that's where we are. So being able to, now that the foundation in terms of bringing all the data is there, it's easier to bring frameworks such as learning algorithms, etc., on top of it, and then feed back into decision making as well as implementing solutions without having human touch itself, right? So I would give it probably a 2 to 3 year journey to get there, rather than something that's going to happen by the next OpenStack Summit.
I think we have covered a broad range of topics, so I got everything that I was looking for. So once again, thanks you for talking to me today, and hopefully we'll see each other again at maybe Red Hat Summit.
It's my pleasure as well. And maybe one last thought is that from an OpenStack momentum perspective, there are a number of customers that we have highlighted at the OpenStack Summit, including IAG, which is a large insurance company based in Australia. They're using
I'll be talking to them today.
Oh, fantastic. Yes. So if you're going to air them, that's great. Another one is Department of Defense. Radiance Technologies, one of our partners, is deploying OpenShift on OpenStack. So you don't think of Department of Defense being bleeding edge typically, but they are really being cloud native in terms of bringing in ability to create applications using OpenShift, and then that's running on top of an OpenStack environment as well. So these are all customer case studies that we've put out as well. So thanks again for your time, and look forward to seeing you soon.
Thanks for watching. Listen to more episodes of the New Stack Makers at thenewstack.io/podcast. Please rate and review us on iTunes, like us on YouTube, and follow us on SoundCloud. Thanks for listening and see you next time.